Hey everyone! Tonight we're standing in a quiet hospital hallway, sterile white walls closing in, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead, and I'm being told I'm not welcome. Not by a stranger, not by an enemy, but by my own daughter-in-law. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And I'd love to know, comment below with your city and what time it is where you're watching. Now, turn off the lights, maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. The security guard at Lexington Medical glanced down at his clipboard with an apologetic shrug. Sorry, ma'am. Only the names on this list are cleared to visit the maternity floor today. I blinked. I'm Margaret Sullivan. I'm the grandmother. My son's wife just gave birth. Caleb, 7 pounds, 2 ounces. He has my nose. He hesitated, his eyes scanning the page again. Then, after an awkward pause, he picked up the phone. Let me check with the room. I stood there, still holding the tiny blue teddy bear I'd picked out weeks ago. I'd chosen it specifically for my grandson's first cuddle. I'd even had his name embroidered across its little belly in gold thread. This has to be a mistake, I thought, as I watched him dial. Brittany wouldn't... Mrs. Sullivan? He said softly. They said, no visitors outside the approved list. I'm really sorry. I smiled faintly and nodded. Could you make sure this gets to the baby? It's from his grandmother. He took the bear gently, almost like it might break. Of course. I walked away before the burn behind my eyes gave way to tears. My heels echoed in the hallway as I reached the elevator, each step steadier than the last. That's the funny thing about power. You don't always feel it when you own it, but I do. Because what Brittany didn't know was that Lexington Medical wasn't just my hospital by heart. It was mine by name. The board might run it. The doctors might staff it. But I owned it. Quietly, legally, and absolutely. I could have called the administrator right then and had that visitor list thrown out. I could have walked into any room on that floor without so much as a sideways glance. But I didn't. Because sometimes, the most powerful move is no move at all. When I got to my car, I sat there for a moment in silence. The smell of new leather, the hum of the air conditioning. The steering wheel felt cold under my hands. Then the tears came, not just for being turned away, but for what it really meant, for what I'd been denying for too long. This wasn't an accident. Brittany had planned this. I had been excluded, strategically, coldly. I checked my phone. A new text from Ethan. He's here. 7 Tazdaubs, 2 Oz. Named him Caleb after Brittany's grandfather. Everything went great. No mention of me. No mom. Come meet him. Not even a photo. That little omission told me everything I needed to know. Brittany was winning. She'd been at it for years now. Softly, sweetly pushing me further and further out of Ethan's life. And now, she was doing it to my grandson too. But today was her final move. And she thought she'd won the game. She didn't realize she was playing chess with the woman who built an empire after losing her husband, who raised a son while running 3 medical facilities, who made every single one of her fortunes by smiling politely while never letting her guard down. Oh, Brittany, you sweet summer intern in a designer scarf. You have no idea what you've just awakened. That night, back home in my Lexington estate, I poured myself a glass of red and sat at the long oak desk that had belonged to my late husband, Thomas. It still smelled faintly like pipe tobacco and cedarwood. I opened a drawer and took out the photograph of Ethan when he was 12, grinning, gap-toothed, holding a second-place trophy like it was Olympic gold. Back when he used to come to me with every scraped knee, every school project, every hard question about life. Back before Brittany, it wasn't just about today. Today was the result. The real issue had started 3 years ago, when Ethan met her. She had that perfect surface glow, charming, sweet, interested in everything, too interested. She asked detailed questions about our family foundation, about Thomas's trust, about the hospital. I'd told myself she was just trying to get close. Now I saw it for what it was, research. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks, because clarity is the beginning of power. And I finally understood what Brittany was after. She wanted control over Ethan, over Caleb, and if she could manage it, over me too. But I hadn't run Lexington Medical for 22 years by letting people like her win. The next morning, I called 3 people. One was my estate lawyer, one was the hospital board chair, and the third, my oldest friend and most dangerous ally, Patrice Callahan. "Patrice," I said, my voice calm as ever. "It's time." I met Patrice at her usual corner booth at the Cambridge Club. She was already sipping on a black coffee, her silver bob impeccably set, nails lacquered in navy, like always. "You look like a woman ready to throw a grenade," she said, sliding a plate of lemon scones toward me. "Tell me where to aim." I didn't smile. Not really. Brittany blocked me from the maternity floor yesterday, her perfectly shaped brow arched. "Oh, so she finally pulled that card." I nodded. "It wasn't an accident. The guard was following a list. She made sure I wasn't on it. Ethan didn't even send a photo. Named the baby after her grandfather." Patrice gave a low whistle. "She's consolidating." "Exactly," I said, stirring my tea slowly. "She thinks I'm too old or too kind to notice. But I've seen this play before." And I had. In my hospital boardroom, in corporate deals, in inheritance battles across more wealthy families than I can count. Brittany was classic. Charm first, isolate second, then seize control through strategic pity and emotional exhaustion. "She thinks I'm in the way," I said. "And now she's making her move." Patrice leaned forward. "So what's yours?" "I'm going to remind her exactly who I am." I started small. The next morning, I called Dr. Caroline Norris, head of pediatrics at Lexington Medical and an old friend from med school. We hadn't caught up in a while, but I figured now was a good time to reconnect. "Margaret, I was just thinking about you," she said cheerfully. "How's retirement treating you?" "Less restful than you'd expect," I replied dryly. "Listen, I wanted to ask something a little delicate. Brittany, Ethan's wife, she brought the baby in recently. Yes?" "Twice, actually," Caroline confirmed. "Perfectly healthy, beautiful little boy. Has she mentioned anything odd? Health scares? Claims about needing isolation or anything to keep me away?" There was a pause. "She's very anxious. Claims the baby's at risk for a rare immune issue. But every test comes back clean. Honestly, it seems more like anxiety than anything physiological." Of course, that lined up with the pattern. Use the baby's health to manufacture control. No diagnosis required. Just a strong enough claim to scare Ethan into compliance. "Thanks, Caroline. I appreciate your honesty." "Anytime," she said. "Let me know if you need anything else. We miss you around here." Later that week, I went to visit Thomas's grave. I do it every month. Sometimes I talk to him. Sometimes I just sit. But this time, I sat down on the bench and started talking like he was across from me, newspaper in hand. "Thomas, you would have seen her coming from a mile away. You always said Ethan was too tender-hearted to spot the manipulators." The wind stirred a few leaves at my feet. "She's working him over. Love. I stayed quiet too long, tried to be gracious and supportive, but it's gone too far." A memory hit me then. The time Thomas and I confronted an old board member who tried to quietly siphon hospital funds into his personal account. Thomas didn't raise his voice. He didn't accuse. He just placed the evidence on the table, looked the man dead in the eye, and said, "I don't need to ruin you. I only need to let you ruin yourself." That was wisdom. That was power. That was the lesson I needed to remember. Let Brittany bury herself with my quiet assistance. That evening, Ethan finally called. "Hey, Mom," he said, a little sheepishly. "Sorry it's been a few days." "No worries," I said, keeping my tone light. "I hope Caleb's doing well." "He's amazing," Ethan said, soft pride in his voice. Even his cries sound intelligent. I chuckled. "That's genetics. From me, of course." He laughed. That was good. Laughter was good. "We were thinking maybe you could come by next week," he offered. "Just a short visit, while Brittany's mom is still in town." A polite window, a tiny one. The kind given to elderly relatives before they're gently shuffled off the calendar. "Sure," I said. "Let me know what works best." But it wasn't enough. One visit? After 3 years of being edged out? No, it was time for a different approach. I sent a small package the next day. Inside, a A framed photo of Thomas holding baby Ethan, printed in soft sepia tones, and a card. From one generation to the next, may Caleb grow up knowing the strength of the men before him. Love, Mom. No gifts, no money, just memory, legacy, and emotion. You see, I wasn't trying to buy my way back in. I was trying to remind Ethan who he really was, and who raised him. Patrice texted later that night. Any movement? Small cracks, I replied. She's still got her claws in, but Ethan's starting to fidget. Want me to dig? Not yet, but stay ready. Because when the time came to expose Brittany's past, and oh, I knew it had shadows, I'd need every name, date, and half-truth she'd ever tried to bury. But not yet. First, I had to show Ethan what love looked like when it wasn't filtered through Brittany's lens. And that meant stepping back into his world. Not as a mother-in-law clawing for relevance, but as the woman who once built a hospital wing in his name. The woman who had quietly kept his student loans paid off. Who'd driven him to school every day after Thomas died. Who never asked for thanks, but deserved every one. I was coming back, carefully, thoughtfully, with grace and strategy. Because when you've been underestimated long enough, there's no sweeter moment than watching your opponent realize you were never the weak one, you were just patient. The next morning, I woke up before the sun, made a cup of Earl Grey, and sat in my garden just listening. There's something sacred about early silence, the kind you only get when the rest of the world is still asleep, and for a moment, you're the only soul awake. It makes you think clearer. And today, I needed clarity. I'd been playing nice for too long, being understanding, gracious, and all that did was give Brittany space to spread her roots deeper into my son's life like ivy climbing a brick wall, slowly choking out anything that wasn't her. But now, I was done pulling punches. I pulled out my notebook, leather-bound, with soft, cream pages that still smelled like the little stationery store in Cambridge, and started making my real list. Not the passive, hopeful one I kept in my kitchen drawer. This one was active, strategic. It had 3 columns: people, leverage, legacy, old habits die hard. Under people, I wrote down everyone who still mattered to Ethan. People Brittany hadn't completely driven off. A few friends from high school, his old coach, Mr. Bowman, even our former neighbor, Mrs. Hill, who used to make Ethan peanut butter cookies and now posted vague prayers on Facebook about the good boys who forget their roots. I reached out to all of them that week. Not directly about Brittany. No, too soon. I asked them about their lives, reminisced about old times, gently dropped updates about Caleb. My goal wasn't gossip. It was seeds, emotional ones, memories. Do you remember when Ethan used to bike over and help you rake leaves every fall? I asked Mrs. Hill. Oh, goodness, yes, she said, her voice cracking with nostalgia. He was such a sweet boy. Still is, I wanted to say, just trapped in someone else's reality. Under leverage, I wrote down Brittany's weak spots. She wasn't from wealth. She didn't know how to hide her tracks properly. She'd curated an image for Ethan, yes, but like a filter over an old photo. It was only as good as your lighting. I remembered how she flinched when I brought up her nonprofit marketing degree at last year's Christmas dinner. Just a flash, just a second. So I dug. I called Clarice Hartwell, my friend from the university's alumni board, and asked, point blank, does a Brittany McAllister show up anywhere in your records for the marketing or communications programs? Clarice laughed. I've been combing records since 1984. The only McAllister I've graduated in 1992, and it was a Herald. Exactly as I suspected. Brittany had lied about her degree. That alone wasn't damning, but it meant she was willing to falsify credentials for status. That went in the leverage column, along with a few screenshots of social media discrepancies and a call I'd made to her last employer, who vaguely remembered a Brittany that left under complicated circumstances. I was building a quiet case, not to use today, but when the moment was right. You don't scream at a storm, darling. You reinforce your foundation and wait. Now, the legacy column. That was for Ethan. That one, I took the most care with. I started sorting through the boxes in our attic. Photos from birthdays, baseball games, camping trips, the note Thomas left me in Ethan's baby book. Raise him strong enough to walk away when he must, but kind enough to stay when he can. I cried when I found that legacy wasn't just money or property, it was the story we tell about who we are. And Brittany had been rewriting Ethan's story page by page, centering herself as the heroine and erasing everyone else. So I started sending Ethan small reminders. A photo of him with his first pet, Scraps, licking ice cream off his nose. A framed copy of his 4th grade essay, Why My Mom Is My Hero. The football trophy he forgot he won senior year, complete with a note from Coach Bowman I'd saved all these years. Ethan responded with a simple, "Wow, I forgot about this. Thank you, Mom. Not much, but more than before." Later that week, I decided it was time to test the waters in person. I showed up with chicken noodle soup, not the canned kind, the from-scratch kind that simmers all day with herbs and love, the kind I made when Ethan had the flu in college and still insisted he could finish his senior thesis without rest. Brittany wasn't thrilled to see me. "Oh," she said at the door, holding Caleb on her hip like a living shield. "I didn't realize we had plans today." "We don't," I said, smiling. "Just thought I'd drop off some soup. You both looked tired last week. Thought you might like a break." Brittany hesitated, then stepped aside. "Well, that's thoughtful." I walked in and immediately noticed Caleb's blanket on the couch. It was polyester, printed with cartoon jungle animals. It looked like it had never been washed. "Where's the one from the box I sent?" I asked casually. "Oh, that? I think it was too scratchy for his skin," she said quickly. Strange, considering it was 100% Peruvian alpaca and hand-washed before I packed it. Another small lie. Add it to the list. I glanced at Ethan, who was bouncing Caleb with tired eyes. "I remember when you couldn't hold a coffee mug without spilling it," I said, teasing. "And now here you are, mastering baby jiggles." Ethan chuckled. "It's a lot, but worth it." Brittany disappeared into the kitchen with the soup. I used the moment. "Ethan," I said gently, "I want to ask you something. Just hear me out." He nodded. "Do you feel like yourself lately?" He looked surprised, then sheepish. "I don't know. I guess I feel like someone new, like everything is about keeping things stable." That was it. The word. Stable. That's what Brittany sold him. Not joy, not family, not growth, just emotional predictability, under her conditions. "Well," I said, "I hope stability doesn't come at the cost of connection. You deserve both." He didn't respond, but his silence was thoughtful. On my way out, Brittany followed me to the door. "Thank you for the soup," she said tightly. I smiled. "Of course. That's what family does. We feed each other when we're worn thin." Her jaw tightened, just slightly. "And Brittany," I added, keeping my tone light, "if you ever want a break, I'd be happy to take Caleb for an afternoon. I raised one decent man. I think I've earned a shot at helping with the next." She didn't answer, but her eyes said plenty. She knew I was back in the game. And this time, I wasn't playing small. Later that week, I found myself sitting at the back of St. Luke's Church during a Wednesday evening service. Not because I'd suddenly become holier than thou, but because I needed to see someone. Ethan's godmother, Ruthie Palmer. Ruthie had known Ethan since he was in diapers. She and I had gone through everything together. First jobs, first heartbreaks, the births of our children, the loss of our husbands. She always had this way of looking at the mess of life and pulling out the thread that actually mattered. I caught her eye just as the choir began its final hymn. She raised an eyebrow and gave me that same sly smile she'd used when we snuck out of a quilting retreat in 1982 to split a bottle of wine in the church van. "Lana Montgomery," she said after the service, gripping my hand. "The only person who can look worried in pearls." I hugged her tighter than I expected. "I need a good friend and a strong cup of tea." We headed back to her place, where she brewed a pot so strong I swear it could wake the dead. I told her everything. Well, almost everything. Enough for her to understand the shape of it. "I'm not crazy, right?" I asked as I refolded my napkin for the 3rd time. "No, honey," Ruthie said, stirring sugar into her mug. "You're just finally done letting someone else tell you how much of your own family you're allowed to love." That hit harder than I expected. I'd spent 3 years pretending I wasn't being edged out. 3 years calling it respecting boundaries, when it was really just exile in small doses. You ever hear of a parasite called a Cymothoa exigua? Ruthie asked, completely out of nowhere. I blinked. A what now? It's a little creature that crawls into a fish's mouth and eats the tongue. Then it becomes the tongue. Controls the fish from inside, like a puppet. I choked on my tea. What kind of National Geographic nightmare are you talking about? She smirked. Just saying, not every manipulator does it with shouting. Some slip in quietly and take over something vital without you noticing. One day, the fish just speaks with a voice that's not its own anymore. Well, that was going to stick with me forever. But she had a point. Brittany hadn't yelled, hadn't fought. She'd smiled, made suggestions, gently nudged. She hadn't needed to dominate Ethan. She just had to become the voice he listened to the most. I left Ruthie's house with a tighter jaw and a looser fear. I had a plan, and I wasn't alone anymore. The next step was subtle. I began inviting Ethan to little things, under the radar, uncontroversial things. Hey, Ethan, I texted one Friday. The antique car show is downtown this weekend. Thought of you and that rickety project you and Dad used to work on. Want to swing by? I didn't expect a yes, but I got one. We met near the food trucks on a sunny afternoon, just the two of us. I brought old photos. One of him and Thomas under the hood of that '69 Ford Mustang, both smeared with grease and grinning like fools. I can't believe you still have this, he said, shaking his head. I have a whole album, I replied. You'd be surprised what moms keep. We didn't talk about Brittany. I didn't bring up Caleb or missing birthdays or hospital security guards. We just talked engines and memories. The next weekend, it was a classic film screening. The one after that, a lecture at the Historical Society. Every time. I made sure Ethan felt like himself again. Not a husband performing for his wife's comfort. Just a man remembering who he used to be, and still could be. And every time, I sent a polite thank you text to Brittany. Short, sweet, unimpeachable. Thank you for letting Ethan come to the antique show today. It meant a lot to reconnect. Letting, a word I chose very carefully, because when she read it, I wanted her to feel that shift. She wasn't the gatekeeper anymore. Then came the breaking point. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a text. One tiny message that set everything in motion. Mom, can we talk? I dropped everything and met him at that little park off Main Street, the one with the duck pond and the creaky wooden bridge. Ethan was already there, tossing crumbs to the ducks like he used to do when he was 6 and convinced they were just feathered, floating dogs. I think I made a mistake, he said softly as I approached. I sat beside him, not saying a word. It's not just about the hospital or the visits, he went on. It's like, every time I try to include you, she twists it, makes it seem like I'm choosing you over her, instead of just with her. That's a false choice, I murmured. I know, but it's been easier to just go along with it. Until lately, now it feels like I'm losing more than I'm protecting. We sat in silence for a moment. Then I asked him the question I'd been holding back for weeks. Do you love her? He swallowed. I don't know anymore. That's when I felt it. The moment. The shift. He wasn't angry. He wasn't defensive. He was just tired. So I offered the one thing I could. Then let's start with truth, I said, pulling a small envelope from my purse. This is everything I've learned about her past, about her plans, about what she's really after. I didn't go looking to ruin her, but I did go looking to protect you. He didn't take it, not yet. He just stared at the envelope like it held a bomb. Whatever you choose to do, I added, I will support you, but if you want to reclaim your life, you need to see the whole picture. He finally took the envelope, and in that moment, I knew. The fish had found its own tongue again. Ethan didn't call the next day, or the day after that. And I didn't press him. I knew what was inside that envelope. A curated collection of truths. Polite, clinical, irrefutable. I didn't include any gossip. Just the facts. Brittany's real name, her employment history, the lies about her education, the legal documents regarding her visits to estate lawyers, and notes from meetings with pediatricians and attorneys where she'd inquired, delicately of course, about power of attorney. The kind of file you don't build unless you're preparing for war, or worse, an inheritance. I spent those next days in a strange kind of stillness, like the air before a storm. Everything calm, but heavy, electric. And then, on a Thursday night, the silence broke. My doorbell rang. I opened it to find Ethan holding Caleb in one arm, a duffel bag slung over the other shoulder. "Hey, Mom," he said quietly. "Can we stay a few days?" I didn't ask questions. I just stepped aside. He didn't bring up the envelope. I didn't bring up Brittany. We just resumed, like the world had paused and now hit play again, but slower, more gently. That night, as I tucked Caleb into the guest room, his cheeks still sticky from my emergency stash of strawberry popsicles, Ethan hovered in the hallway, awkward and quiet. "You sure this is okay?" he asked. "Ethan," I said, brushing a curl from Caleb's forehead, "there will never be a day you're not welcome in my home." He nodded, swallowing hard. Then, just before he walked away, he said, "I read it, the envelope." I didn't respond. Not yet. I let him have the silence to fill however he needed. "I confronted her," he added, quieter. "She didn't deny any of it. Not really. Just cried. Said it was all for us. For Caleb." "How did that feel?" I asked. He looked at me, eyes exhausted, like she was trying to make me feel guilty for discovering the truth. "That's what manipulators do," I said softly. "They steal your compass and hand you a map that leads you back to them, every time." The next few days were blissfully uneventful. Caleb quickly claimed my living room as his domain. Every cushion became a mountain, every throw blanket a dragon's lair, every plastic dinosaur a soldier in his imaginary war against bedtime. Ethan eased into old routines. He made coffee the way his father had. Too strong, too early. He offered to mow the lawn, even though it was mostly just clover and wishful thinking. He sat with me at dusk on the porch swing, both of us watching the street like sentinels of an older time. One evening, he finally asked, "Do you think she ever loved me?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I handed him the worn-out copy of Mice and Men his father had kept on the shelf, bookmarked to a passage he used to quote in moments like these. "Sometimes people love what you represent more than who you are," I said. "Security, status, legacy, but real love doesn't need leverage. It doesn't keep score, and it sure as hell doesn't lie." Ethan nodded, flipping through the pages without really reading. "You know, she started asking about my share of the hospital," he said after a long pause. Subtly at first, like, would I be on the board someday? Was there a succession plan? Could we start budgeting for bigger things? I shook my head. Bigger things like what? Vacation homes, private school, a European nanny. "Ah," I said, taking a sip of tea. "All the essentials." He smiled, weakly. "I think I knew, deep down, but I wanted it to be real so badly." "You were raised to believe in love that stays," I said. "That's not weakness. That's hope." By the following week, Ethan had called a lawyer, not for divorce yet, but to separate finances, to create a paper trail. He wasn't sure what came next, but he wanted clarity, safety, a record of intent. Brittany, on the other hand, did what Brittany did best, rebranded. She began posting online about her journey through postpartum anxiety, painting herself as a mother in crisis, unsupported by her in-laws, misunderstood by the world. There were artfully filtered photos of her holding Caleb, backlit by sunlight, captions full of hashtags like #resilience and healing. My favorite was the one where she tagged the hospital and wrote, "Some wounds aren't visible on scans." Classic. I didn't respond. Not publicly, not privately. I let her talk to the void, hoping someone would throw her a lifeline of sympathy. Because Brittany didn't want healing. She wanted to control the narrative. But now, finally, she wasn't the only author in the room. Then came the custody letter, delivered by courier, folded crisply in a white envelope with her new attorney's letterhead. A request for formal mediation. Claims that I was emotionally unstable, that my presence caused undue stress to Caleb, that Ethan's temporary absence from the marital home was a cause for concern. She wanted supervised visitation. She wanted leverage. She wanted to punish Ethan, and by extension, me, for daring to disrupt her perfect little puppet show. But she forgot something important. You don't pick a fight with a woman who owns the stage. That evening, I poured myself a glass of wine, pulled out my laptop, and opened a blank document. At the top, I typed, "Custodial history and documented interactions regarding Brittany Taylor." And then, I began to write. Every incident, every manipulated visit, every doctor's note, every missed holiday and manufactured emergency, every moment of control that left a paper trail. This wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. And once it's written down, truth has a funny way of refusing to be ignored. The hearing wasn't for another 3 weeks, but Brittany didn't wait. She began her campaign immediately. She messaged Ethan's coworkers, claimed he was emotionally volatile, said he'd left her alone with a newborn in a fragile state. She hinted at postpartum depression, hers, of course, and added just enough tears to each interaction to make people pause. A whisper here, a careful sigh there. It didn't take much. "She's playing the long game," Ethan said one night, pacing my kitchen with a spoonful of peanut butter in his hand. "The victim card, laying the groundwork. I know what she's doing, and I still feel guilty half the time." "That's the point," I said. "She doesn't need to win the truth, just the sympathy." The next day, I called Patricia. Not Brittany's doctor. She would never see anyone long enough to establish a real relationship. But my physician, the one I'd known for 30 years, sharp as a tack, 3 kids of her own, and zero tolerance for nonsense. "I need a statement," I said, "from someone the court will respect." She didn't ask why, just nodded and said, "You'll have it in writing by Friday." Meanwhile, Caleb bloomed. He laughed more, slept longer, threw fewer tantrums, and his favorite place to be? Wrapped in my arms, pressed against my chest, where he could hear my heartbeat and settle like a stone sinking into soft earth. Ethan noticed. "He's calmer here," he said one morning as Caleb stacked wooden blocks with an intensity usually reserved for brain surgery. "It's like he knows this space isn't charged." I smiled. Children feel what we bury. That night, Ethan brought down a box of photos from the attic. Old family vacations, Charles's retirement dinner, Ethan's 8th birthday, him covered in frosting and pride. "You think Dad would have seen through her?" he asked. "Immediately," I said. "Your father had a nose for hidden motives. That's why he loved my cooking but never let me touch the taxes." Ethan chuckled. Then, more seriously, "I think I wanted her to love him, to understand who I came from." "She couldn't," I said gently, "because if she saw him clearly, she would have known you were never going to be hers to control." The court date loomed like a storm on the horizon. In preparation, Ethan's lawyer, a wiry woman named Camille with a gift for shredding false narratives, met with me twice a week. "She's going to try to frame this as a mental health issue," Camille said during one meeting, tapping her pen. "Not hers, yours." "I know. She'll use your age, your wealth, your influence, try to make you the villain." "I'm ready." She studied me, then smiled. "You know, most people crumble when I say that." "I've buried a husband," I said. "Run a hospital, raised a son. This is just another surgery. Painful, necessary, but ultimately healing." She nodded. "I'm going to like working with you." 1 week before the hearing, Brittany made her final move. A letter, handwritten, left on my doorstep inside a pale blue envelope, the kind you send thank you cards in, the kind of envelope that's supposed to suggest softness. Inside, "I don't want this to be a war. Lorraine, we're both women who fought hard for the men in our lives. We should be allies, not enemies. Let's talk. Just the 2 of us. No lawyers, no defenses, for Caleb's sake." For a moment, I almost laughed. She wanted a truce, not out of remorse, but because her hand was getting weak. I set the card aside and made myself a cup of tea. Then I called Camille. "She wants to meet," I said, "one-on-one." "Don't do it." "I wasn't planning to, but I do want you to subpoena her phone records. I suspect she's been messaging people about Ethan. The smear campaign needs to be documented." Camille whistled. "Remind me not to cross you." "You're not married to my son," I said, "so you're safe." The morning of the hearing, I dressed deliberately, not flashy, not frail, just solid. A slate blue pantsuit Charles always loved. Modest jewelry. Soft curls at my shoulders. The look of a woman who knows who she is and isn't here to be dismissed. We walked into the courthouse as a trio. Ethan, Caleb, and me, a family. Brittany arrived alone. She wore ivory, a quiet halo of innocence. Her makeup was softer than usual. Her voice breathy when she greeted the bailiff. Theatrics. We sat. The hearing began, and for 3 hours, Camille dismantled Brittany's story like a contractor tearing down drywall with a crowbar. She presented Brittany's online posts, full of curated pity. She showed Brittany's estate planning consultations. She presented Patricia's statement about my physical and mental health. And finally, she submitted the photograph I'd taken, the one of Brittany leaving the elder law attorney's office. When Brittany took the stand, she faltered. Her voice quivered, not with emotion, but with calculation. Every answer was rehearsed, every pause dramatic. But truth doesn't need performance. It just needs presence. And when the judge asked her directly, "Why did you claim emotional instability without medical documentation?" Brittany blinked, mouth slightly open. Then she said, "I just had a feeling." That did it. We won. Not everything, but enough. Joint custody, supervised transitions, and a stipulation. No unilateral decisions regarding Caleb's exposure to extended family. That meant me. I would not be erased. Not now. Not ever again. As we exited the courthouse, Ethan squeezed my hand. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For never letting go." I smiled. "Sweetheart," I said. "Letting go is easy. It's the holding on that takes real love." The courthouse smelled like old wood and tired lies. But when we stepped out into the sunlight that day, it was like I could breathe fully again. Not because we'd won something in court. Legal victories are temporary. They're written on paper. The real wins are carved into people's hearts, and that takes time. Caleb reached for me as soon as we got to the parking lot. His tiny hands reached up with complete trust, like he knew, like he'd always known. And that moment was worth every fight. I strapped him into his car seat while Ethan sat silently behind the wheel. He didn't start the car right away. He just stared straight ahead, fists resting on the steering wheel, the muscles in his jaw working. "She didn't even look at him," he finally said. When we walked past, Brittany didn't even glance at her own son. I didn't reply. Some wounds don't want words. They just want silence and understanding. Back at the house, Caleb crawled straight into the sunbeams stretching across my living room rug, flopped down on his back, and giggled at the ceiling fan. I sat on the couch and watched him like you watch a fire, entranced and a little in awe. Ethan came out of the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee. "She's going to appeal," he said. "She might," I replied. But even Brittany can't fake maternal instinct forever. Eventually, people catch on. You think she ever loved me? That's a hard question, one that could unravel a man if he's not ready. "She loved the version of you that gave her power," I said softly. "But the real you, the man you're becoming now, she never even bothered to meet him." Ethan stared into his coffee, the steam curling like question marks. "You know," I added, "when your father and I got married, I made him promise something." "What was that?" "That no matter what happened, money, loss, fights, illness, we'd never let fear dictate our choices. Love can survive almost anything, except fear." "And that's what I let in?" "You didn't let it in, sweetheart. She brought it in her luggage. You were just too kind to check her bags." He gave a short laugh, the kind that stings a little in the chest. We watched Caleb for a long time in companionable quiet, and then Ethan looked at me and said something I wasn't expecting. "I want you to be in Caleb's life full-time." "I already am," I replied gently. "No, I mean, really, I want you to help raise him, live with us, at least for now. Maybe we get a place together, a real home." I blinked. All the years of being pushed out, minimized, dismissed. The carefully curated distance Brittany had installed brick by brick between me and my son, undone in a single afternoon. "You sure about that?" I asked. He nodded. "I think I was always meant to raise Caleb with you, with someone who teaches love without strings." 3 weeks later, we moved. Not into my estate, That place held too many ghosts and not enough toddler-friendly outlets. We found a craftsman-style house in a quiet cul-de-sac. Big windows, creaky floors, and a backyard that backed into a patch of woods Caleb could someday build forts in. We filled it with soft rugs, firm boundaries, and new traditions. Wednesday was pancake night. Caleb insisted on blueberries. Saturday mornings meant a trip to the farmer's market. Ethan carried Caleb on his shoulders while I negotiated over tomatoes and made small talk with neighbors I hadn't spoken to in years. We were a team, not a perfect family, just a real one. But Brittany didn't fade into the background. Oh, no. People like her rarely do. She posted cryptic quotes on social media about toxic elders and protecting your peace. She dressed Caleb in matching outfits for supervised visits and staged photo shoots during her allotted hours. One time, she sent him back in a shirt that read, "Mommy's little man." Caleb smeared yogurt on it by lunch. She filed a motion to adjust custody, denied. She tried to get the visitation supervisor changed, denied. But every move she made was desperate, and desperation has a scent. It's sharp and acidic and unmistakable. One Tuesday afternoon, I got a call from Dr. Chen. "Leona," she said, "I just wanted to tell you, Caleb passed his 12-month checkup with flying colors, and also, I've never seen a child shift so completely in such a short time." "Shift how?" "Emotionally. When you first brought him in, he was cautious, tense, like he didn't quite feel safe. But now, he engages, he babbles, he reaches for people. That's not just biology, that's environment." I thanked her and hung up with tears in my eyes. We were doing something right. One night, Ethan stood in the hallway outside Caleb's room, watching him sleep in the soft glow of the nightlight. "I missed so much," he whispered. "Maybe," I said, "but not everything. You were brave enough to change the story before it was too late." He turned to look at me. What if she tries again? What if she waits 5 years and comes for him when we're not ready? "She will," I said, "because people like Brittany don't walk away from control. But by then, Caleb will know who his people are. He'll know what real love feels like. That's a shield no court can take away." Ethan didn't answer, just nodded. And then, because we're both deeply sentimental people pretending to be pragmatic, we stood there another 5 minutes, watching a toddler breathe. Life wasn't magically perfect. There were tantrums and food thrown, and the time Caleb got into my nail polish and painted the dog. But there was also growth, and laughter, and joy not laced with manipulation. That was the most startling thing, how light a home can feel when no one's pretending. We still had to attend the supervised visits, still had to answer texts that felt more like traps. But Brittany's power was waning. She knew it, and so did we. One Sunday evening, as we finished dinner on the patio, Caleb climbed onto Ethan's lap, reached for my hand, and said, "Nana." It was the first time he said it without prompting, just his voice, just that word. I felt something inside me, something that had been cracked and bruised for years, begin to heal. "Hey, buddy," Ethan said softly. "You love your Nana?" Caleb nodded, then shoved a mashed pea into my mouth. And I thought, this is the reward for not giving up. You'd think by now, I'd be used to Brittany's games. But just when the water starts to still, she tosses another stone to stir up the mud. It was a Tuesday, rainy, like the sky itself couldn't decide if it wanted to pour or spit. Ethan was already at work, and I had just finished putting Caleb down for his morning nap. I had that rare moment of quiet, warm coffee in hand, when the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there she was. Brittany, soaked in designer rain gear and a fake smile so polished it could cut glass. "Hi, Leona," she said sweetly. "I was just in the area and thought maybe I could drop off a few things for Caleb." I raised an eyebrow. During my scheduled custody hours, she clutched the reusable shopping bag in her arms like it was sacred. "It's just a few books and clothes, things I thought he might like." I stepped aside, not because I trusted her, but because I knew she'd turn this into a legal complaint if I didn't. Let the record show I was hospitable. She walked in like she owned the place. Her eyes immediately scanned the room, judging everything. The toys on the rug, the family photos on the mantle, even the scent of lavender from the candle on the counter. "He sleeps upstairs?" she asked, already heading that way. "No," I said firmly. "He's napping, and this isn't a visit." Her smile slipped. "I just want to see him for a second." "You want to violate the terms of your supervised visitation order? That's a bold choice, Brittany." That hit her. She paused, then turned around slowly, placing the bag down with exaggerated care. "I miss my son," I nodded. "You miss control. You always twist things. I don't have to. You tie the knots yourself." She took a breath, shaky but calculated. "I want to renegotiate the custody terms." I crossed my arms. "Then go through your lawyer." "I thought we could be civil." "Brittany, the last time you were civil, you tried to have me declared mentally unfit." Her face flushed. "I was under stress. Save it for someone who wasn't there." For a beat, she looked like she might explode. But then, something flickered in her expression. Not anger, strategy. "You know," she said, voice dripping with sugar again, "Caleb's going to grow up, and he'll start asking questions about why Mommy wasn't around, about why Nana always answered the phone instead of Dad." I stared at her. "And when he asks, I'll tell him the truth, age-appropriate and unflinching." She didn't like that. "You're making it hard for him to have both parents. And you made it hard for him to have one safe home." She reached for the bag again. "You'll give him these? I'll inspect them. If anything's inappropriate, I'll burn it." Her lips parted in shock. "You wouldn't dare." "Oh, sweetheart," I said quietly. "I would dare so many things." She stormed out without another word, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the coat hooks. Caleb didn't wake up. That's how peaceful our house had become. That afternoon, I called my lawyer, Robert, just to document the visit. No escalation, just facts. "I get the feeling," I told him, "that she's preparing another move. She may be trying to show a judge she's being proactive, showing up, delivering gifts, making it seem like she's trying to co-parent." "So we brace ourselves?" He chuckled dryly. "You don't brace, Leona. You build." He was right. That night, I pulled out my notebook, the one I'd started back when Caleb was born. It wasn't just a journal. It was a map, a record of all the manipulations, the court dates, the emotional landmines, and the victories. On the first page, I wrote a single line in bold marker. "Caleb will grow up knowing he is loved, not leveraged." Weeks passed. Brittany didn't call, didn't text, and for a moment, we almost forgot to watch the rearview mirror. Then came the envelope. Thick, crisp paper, certified mail. Brittany's new motion, petitioning for unsupervised overnight visits with Caleb. I felt the heat rise in my chest. Not panic, not fear, just the indignation of a woman who had worked too hard to let a lie bloom unchecked. I waited until Caleb was down for the night and Ethan had come home before I brought it up. "She wants overnights." He shook his head. "Absolutely not. I thought you should be the one to say it in court." "I will." He stared down at the motion and then looked up at me. "Mom, thank you." "For what?" "For never giving up on me. Even when I was so deep in it I couldn't see daylight." I smiled, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. "I knew the man you were, even when you forgot." The court date came faster than expected. Brittany arrived in pearls and pity, clutching her copy of What to Expect When You've Alienated Everyone. Her lawyer made an impassioned argument about her growth, her healing, her desire to rebuild her relationship with Caleb. Then it was Ethan's turn. He didn't use notes. He just stood there and told the truth. She's not ready. Caleb doesn't know her. When they meet, it's awkward, forced. She uses him like a prop for social media and bribes him with toys to get smiles. But when she thinks no one's watching, she checks out. The judge asked if Brittany had ever attended parenting classes or family counseling. She signed up twice, Ethan replied. Canceled both times. I saw it. The shift. The judge's eyebrows lifting ever so slightly. The corners of the clerk's mouth tightening. The bailiff shaking his head when he thought no one noticed. This wasn't about bitterness. It wasn't revenge. This was protection. And the court saw that. Motion denied. Again. On the drive home, Caleb babbled from his car seat about dinosaurs and blueberries, and something about a raccoon that may or may not have been a dream. and I just let the sound of his voice wash over me. "We're gonna be okay, aren't we?" Ethan said, not quite a question. "We already are," I replied. "Sometimes, the battle isn't about winning everything. It's about protecting the little things, like a quiet bedtime or a child's trust." And in that, we were undefeated. When we got back home from court that day, something felt different in the air. Not just relief, though that was there too, but a sense of clarity, the kind that comes when the fog finally lifts and you see the road you've been walking for what it really is. Ethan was quiet as he carried Caleb inside. Not the brooding silence I'd seen during his darker days, but the kind of thoughtful stillness that meant gears were turning in his head. I started making tea, our little ritual after hard days, and when I turned around, I found him standing at the kitchen island, staring at the framed photo of Dad. "He would have loved Caleb," he said softly. I nodded. "He would have taught him to fish and how to sneak dessert before dinner." Ethan smiled at that, a flicker of boyhood returning to his eyes. "He would have seen through Brittany in a minute." "Oh, honey," I said, pouring his cup. "He did, just silently." Ethan sighed, taking the tea. "You think I made a mistake, marrying her. I think you made a human decision at a time when you needed connection, and I think Brittany knew exactly how to fill that gap." He didn't argue. He didn't have to. We sat there, the three of us, Caleb snoozing on the couch, me and Ethan at the kitchen table like so many times before. But this time, we weren't scrambling to fix anything. We were settling in, fortifying. "You know," he said after a while, "I've been thinking about moving out." I blinked. "Out of here?" He nodded. "You've done more than your share. I need to stand on my own again, for Caleb's sake." I looked at him for a long second, my heart tugging and swelling at the same time. This was what I'd been working for, not just safety, but independence. Not just distance from Brittany, but direction for Ethan. "You have a plan?" "Yeah. There's a small house for rent just 3 streets over. Needs work, but it's got a backyard for Caleb. I figure it's time I learned how to fix a leaky sink." I smiled. "I'll teach you." Moving day came 2 weeks later. Caleb thought it was an adventure. Boxes became castles. Tape rolls became toys. He danced barefoot in the empty living room, laughing like the past year hadn't existed. And maybe, for him, it hadn't. Not in the way it did for us. Ethan painted Caleb's room a soft blue. I helped hang blackout curtains and shelves. When it was all done, we stood in the doorway, watching Caleb line up his dinosaur figurines on the windowsill. "I'm scared," Ethan said quietly. I nodded. "Good. It means you care." That night, I went home to an unusually quiet house. No toys on the rug, no stray socks in the hallway, no sounds of Ethan pacing upstairs while Caleb fought bedtime. I missed it more than I expected, but I also slept better than I had in months. A few days later, Brittany texted, "Can I call you? Please, just 5 minutes." I stared at it for a while, thumb hovering. Then I typed, "If it's about Caleb, yes." She called 10 minutes later, her voice softer than usual. "I heard Ethan moved out." "Yes." "To a house nearby?" I didn't respond. She already knew. She just wanted me to confirm it. I wanted to say thank you. That surprised me. "For what?" "For raising him right. For keeping Caleb safe. I know you don't believe me, but I do love him." I took a breath. "Brittany, love without stability is confusion. Love without boundaries is chaos. Caleb needs more than affection. He needs safety, predictability, peace." She was quiet. Then, in a voice so fragile I almost didn't recognize it, she said, "I don't know how to be that. That's the first honest thing you've said in a long time. I want to learn." "Then start small. Therapy, classes, consistency. Caleb won't need you to be perfect. He'll need you to be present." "I don't want him to hate me." "He won't. Not if you do the work." It was a hard conversation, but it felt like the kind of hard that builds something, not just breaks. Over the next month, Brittany started showing up, not in our lives, but in her own. She joined a parenting group, attended therapy, sent updates, not to guilt or manipulate, but to share. Ethan was cautious. So was I. Trust, once broken, isn't rebuilt overnight. But when she showed up to Caleb's daycare fundraiser and stayed for the whole thing, quietly, respectfully, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Humility. Later that evening, Ethan said, "I don't know if I'll ever trust her again." "You don't have to," I said. "You just have to be the parent Caleb can rely on." He looked at me, tired but lighter. "I think I finally am." Ethan's new house became a second home for me. Though I was careful to knock now, I wanted to respect the space he was building, not just physically, but emotionally. The rooms were slowly taking on warmth, not the glossy warmth of showroom furniture or social media filters, but real warmth, piles of laundry in the hallway, finger-painted suns taped to the fridge, dinosaur footprints in chalk on the back porch. Caleb was thriving. His speech was improving. His laugh was louder. He ran to the front door when I visited, arms wide, voice bright. And Ethan? He was waking up. The shell that Brittany had built around him, one of doubt and deference, was cracking. Each time he made a parenting decision on his own, you could see it, the quiet pride of capability. "Mom," he said one Saturday, as we sat outside drinking lemonade while Caleb stomped through a mud puddle. "I didn't know I could do this alone." "You're not alone," I said, squeezing his hand. "You're just doing it without fear." He smiled. "That's new?" That same week, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email, not a text, a real envelope with real ink. Return address, Brittany Monroe. I hesitated before opening it. My gut churned like it was high school again, and I'd just gotten a note from someone I didn't trust. Inside, one page, handwritten, neat, careful cursive. "Leona, thank you for not destroying me. You had every reason to, every resource, and you didn't. I've started volunteering at a shelter, mostly kitchen duty. It's humbling to serve people who don't know your last name. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted you to know. I'm trying. I hope Caleb grows up knowing the kind of woman you are. Brittany." I read it twice, then I folded it back up and tucked it into the back of my recipe box. Not forgiveness, not yet. But maybe the first page of a new story. The seasons shifted, as they always do. The first leaves turned gold. I picked out a tiny hoodie for Caleb, soft as clouds. I brought over cinnamon muffins, the kind Ethan used to love as a kid. Life was still busy, still unpredictable, but no longer chaotic. One morning, I watched Caleb as he played with a toy stethoscope, pretending to be a doctor. He turned to Ethan and said, "You sick, Daddy? I fix you." Ethan chuckled. "Better fix my tired feet." Caleb solemnly tapped his shoe and said, "All better." And just like that, the world tilted a little more into place. That night, Ethan asked if I could stay after Caleb went to bed. We sat on his porch, the cool air settling around us like a soft shawl. "I've been thinking about custody," he said. "Long term." "You're worried?" "Somewhat. Brittany's doing better, but I don't know if she can ever be stable enough for full shared custody." "You don't have to decide that now," I said gently. "The court knows you're the primary caregiver. Brittany will have to prove consistency." "I don't want to punish her," he said. "You're not. You're protecting Caleb." He leaned back in the chair. "Do you think people really change?" I paused. "People grow. That's different than change." "How so?" "Change can be sudden, like a storm, but growth is slow, messy, and not everyone's willing to get dirt under their nails." He nodded slowly. "I guess we'll see what Brittany's willing to do." A week later, she sent another message. She'd enrolled in a certification course, pediatric nutrition. She wanted to be involved with Caleb's meals, school lunches, his health. Ethan was skeptical, but curious. He agreed to let her join one pediatrician visit, supervised, clear boundaries. Afterward, he said, she was quiet, listened, took notes, asked good questions, and I didn't feel like she was performing, just trying. Did Caleb seem okay? Yeah, he actually hugged her goodbye. Progress, not perfection, but real. It was during one of our Saturday pancake mornings that Caleb, now 3.5, said something that stopped us both. "Mommy said Nana's a boss lady." Ethan blinked. "She said that?" Caleb nodded. "She said Nana's scary but nice." I couldn't help but laugh. I'll take it. She's not wrong, Ethan added with a grin. You've been the calm in our chaos, Mom. I ruffled Caleb's curls. Boss ladies come in all forms. I just prefer aprons to briefcases these days. There was still more to come. Co-parenting trials, school choices, the slow process of rebuilding trust between fractured lines. But something had solidified. We weren't just surviving anymore. We were healing. And for the first time in years, I wasn't bracing for the next blow. I was preparing for the next chapter. A few weeks later, Ethan surprised me. He showed up at my place one evening, not with Caleb, not with a crisis, but with a small white box wrapped in a blue ribbon. "What's this?" I asked, drying my hands on a dish towel. "Open it," he said, looking both proud and shy, the same way he did when he was 5 and gave me a macaroni necklace on Mother's Day. Inside the box was a delicate silver locket. On one side, a tiny photo of Caleb. On the other, a quote etched in soft script. "You didn't just raise me, you rescued me." I couldn't speak right away. My throat was tight. Ethan gently said, "I know I got lost for a while, and I know you held back when you could have done more damage. I see that now. Thank you for not giving up on me." I took his hand in mine. "Sweetheart, it was never about giving up. It was about knowing when to wait and when to act. I waited until you were ready." He nodded. "And I'm ready now, to live with more purpose, for Caleb, for myself." Things between Ethan and Brittany continued cautiously. She was granted supervised visits every other weekend. Ethan remained firm about boundaries, and to my surprise, Brittany respected them. There was no big reconciliation, no dramatic apology tour, but there was presence. She showed up, she stayed sober, she played with Caleb, listened to him, and slowly started carving out a new version of herself. She even stopped trying to erase me. One afternoon, when I arrived to pick up Caleb from a visit, she handed me his coat and said, "He talks about you all the time, about your garden, your pancakes, the fox statue by your fountain." I smiled. "He's got a sharp memory. He's happy," she said softly. "He laughs more now. That's because of you and Ethan. I want to add to that, not undo it." It was the closest thing to peace we'd ever shared. Meanwhile, the hospital board had been nudging me toward more official retirement. I'd remained involved part-time, mostly consulting, mentoring new leadership, and helping with strategic decisions. But now, they wanted me to consider stepping down completely. I thought I'd resist. But when I looked around my life, the morning giggles, the backyard tea parties with Caleb, Ethan's newfound confidence, I realized something. I wasn't leaving something behind. I was making room for more. So I handed in my final resignation. 39 years, 6 expansions, and 1 legacy later, I was stepping into a new role, full-time Nana. I celebrated by hosting a Sunday brunch, not a formal affair, just pancakes, fruit, and lots of syrup. Ethan invited a few of his close friends, and even Brittany dropped by for an hour with a dish of deviled eggs. As we sat outside under the maple trees, Caleb on my lap insisting on feeding me blueberries one at a time, I felt something settle in me. Contentment. Not the glossy kind you post about online. The quiet, real kind that makes you breathe deeper and smile slower. That evening, after everyone had gone, Ethan lingered. He stood in the doorway of my sunroom, watching Caleb chase bubbles in the yard with Brittany. "You know," he said, "for a long time, I thought being a good parent meant making the right decisions all the time. Now I think it's more about making brave ones." I glanced at him. "What changed?" "You did. You showed me that protecting someone doesn't always mean stepping in. It can mean stepping back until the right moment." "That's called timing," I said, "or wisdom, or just surviving enough mistakes to know when to breathe and when to bite." He laughed. "You make it sound easy." "Oh, it's never easy, but it's worth it." That night, I sat at my desk writing in my old leather-bound journal. I'd started it after Charles died. It was where I processed, remembered, healed. I wrote about the past few months, the heartbreak, the confrontation, the rebuilding. I wrote about Ethan's courage, Brittany's unexpected growth, Caleb's sweetness. And then, in a margin, I scribbled a little note to myself. You didn't win by force. You won by love, persistence, and silence when silence was stronger than shouting. A few days later, Caleb had a preschool performance, a little autumn-themed play where the kids wore leaf costumes and sang about squirrels and pumpkins. He spotted me in the crowd and waved so hard, he nearly toppled over. When the show was done, he ran to me and shouted, "Nana, did you hear me sing?" "Loud and clear," I said, scooping him up. Brittany and Ethan stood nearby. She offered a small smile. "He kept asking this morning if you'd be there. I wouldn't miss it for anything." And I meant it, because I was no longer just watching life go by. I was part of it, actively, fully, joyfully. That evening, Ethan called. "Mom, you free next Saturday?" "Of course. Why?" "I was thinking of hosting a little dinner, just us, and maybe inviting Brittany, too. She's been doing well, and I want Caleb to feel like we're a team, even if we're not together." I hesitated just a second, then said, "If you think she's earned that trust, I'll support it. I think she's trying, and I think we're strong enough now to let her try." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "I'll bring dessert." The Saturday dinner at Ethan's place was one of those evenings that unfolded slowly, quietly. No dramatic moments, no speeches or apologies, just a soft recalibration of what family looked like now. Brittany brought a salad, not the kind from a store. She chopped the vegetables herself, made the dressing from scratch. It was a small thing, but I noticed. Caleb ran between us all like a happy little comet, grabbing bites of bread, asking for just one more story, and insisting that his toy dinosaur needed its own seat at the table. I brought a cherry pie and watched as Brittany helped serve it, cutting even slices without waiting to be asked. At one point, I saw her pause behind Ethan's chair, place her hand gently on his shoulder, and say, "Thanks for letting me be here." He nodded. Later that night, as we cleared dishes together in the kitchen, Ethan whispered, "Do you think we'll ever be a real family again?" I handed him a damp dish towel. "I think you already are. Just a different kind of real." He let out a long breath, like he'd been holding it for years. A week later, I hosted the board of directors for a small farewell gathering. Nothing grand, just tea, some speeches, a slideshow that embarrassingly included a photo of me from the 90s, with massive shoulder pads and even bigger hair. But when it was my turn to speak, I found myself drifting off script. "I've spent almost 4 decades inside these walls," I began. "And in that time, I've seen miracles and heartbreak, births and goodbyes, growth and grief. But the most important thing I've learned isn't about medicine or management. It's this. People don't just need care, they need to feel seen, valued, safe." I paused, looking around the room at the faces that had been with me through so much. I didn't always get it right, but I never stopped trying. And that's the best we can offer each other, isn't it? The willingness to keep trying. The applause that followed wasn't just polite, it was personal. That weekend, I woke early, before the birds, before the house stirred. I made coffee and stood at the window, watching dawn roll across the hills behind the estate. It was my favorite time of day, the in-between, the soft edge where yesterday becomes tomorrow. And it struck me. This was the life I'd earned, a quiet morning with nothing to prove and everything to savor. That afternoon, I took Caleb to the botanical gardens. He'd developed a fascination with butterflies, and I'd promised him the conservatory had a whole room full of them. He pressed his little hands against the glass as the wings fluttered around us, blue, gold, even one with translucent tips. "Nana," he whispered, "they're magic." "They are," I said, kneeling beside him. "And so are you." He looked at me with those wide, curious eyes. "Are you old?" I chuckled. "Yes, I am." "Are you going to disappear like the butterflies?" I blinked, caught off guard. "Not for a very long time, sweetheart, and even when I do, you'll still have all the stories." He thought about that, then nodded. "I'll remember your pancakes." I pulled him into my arms, heart aching with a love so deep it hurt. That's all I could ever ask. One evening in late October, Ethan brought me a small envelope. Inside was a photo of the 3 of us, me, Ethan, and Caleb, standing in front of the maple tree in my backyard, our arms around each other, faces full of sun and laughter. He'd framed a copy for my bedroom. "You said you didn't need pictures," he teased, "but I thought maybe you'd want this one." I hung it on the wall across from my bed. That way, it would be the last thing I saw before I closed my eyes, and the first thing I saw when I opened them. A reminder. I hadn't just survived everything that happened. I'd rebuilt something even better in its place. On the first snowy morning of winter, Brittany called. "Leona, I'm applying for nursing school," she said, voice trembling with nerves and hope. "I don't know if I'll get in, but I wanted you to be the first to know." I sat in stunned silence for a moment. "I think you'd make a damn good nurse." She laughed softly. "Coming from you, that means more than you know." It was a quiet truce between us. No need to rewrite the past. We were just writing a better chapter now. That night, as I tucked Caleb into bed at my place, he'd asked for a sleepover, I sat beside him until his breathing slowed and his fists unclenched from his blanket. I looked around the room filled with soft toys, star-shaped nightlights, and books lined on the shelf. So different from the life I'd imagined I'd live at this age. And yet, somehow, exactly right. I walked downstairs, poured myself a cup of tea, and sank into the armchair by the fire. Outside, snow dusted the tops of the pine trees. Inside, I felt warm in every possible way. This was my life now. Not perfect, but fully mine. Tonight, as our journey winds to a close, I want to slow things down with you. Just for a moment. Let's settle into the quiet together. If you're still here with me, thank you. I hope the flicker of this story brought you something. A whisper of strength, a mirror of recognition, or maybe just the feeling that you're not alone out there in the dark. You know, I think we all carry our own quiet battles. Some of us are Leona, trying to be heard after years of silence. Some of us are Ethan, caught between love and loyalty. Some are even Brittany, flawed, confused, desperate to rewrite the damage we didn't mean to cause. But what matters most isn't where we've been, it's where we choose to go next. The truth is, love, real, steady, inconvenient love, is rarely clean or easy. It requires courage, boundaries, forgiveness, and sometimes it means standing up for yourself in a way that might shake the walls, but save your soul. So if you're listening right now and there's something you've been holding back, some truth, some tenderness, some line that needs redrawing, I hope Leona's story gives you the strength to take that step. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be heard. You are not invisible. Now, turn off the screen. Let the silence wrap around you like a soft blanket and drift into sleep, knowing that tomorrow is another chance, another breath, another beginning. And if this story moved you, even a little, I hope you'll join me for the next one. 2 more stories are waiting on the end screen. Let them surprise you. Thank you, from the bottom of my heart, for keeping me company tonight. Don't forget to subscribe, and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.